The FBI learned that a woman and her children had been leading a covert life 13 years after they disappeared. When Eileen Clark decided she had had enough, she took her 3 kids and left the New Mexico house she and her husband John lived on a February day in 1995. Welcome to USA Stories channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. The 4 then fled to the opposite side of the globe and started a new life there after spending some time on the run in North America. But ultimately, over 15 years later, their history came up with them. The narrative started in the middle of the 1980s in the U.S. state of Georgia, in the southeast, where Eileen Van Sant, then 28 years old, worked as a server in a restaurant. Currently, she became friends with the 25-year-old manager John, and the two quickly developed a romantic relationship. They became engaged shortly after, and in June 1986, they were married in Atlanta. Eileen eventually gave birth to a daughter named Rebecca, as well as 2 sons, Chandler and Hayden. After her kids were born, Eileen made the decision to give up her job and become a full-time stay-at-home mother. Despite experiencing a brief episode of postpartum depression, she appeared to adapt well to her new position. Then, shortly after Rebecca was born in 1993, the Clarks' situation deteriorated. According to Eileen, John reportedly lost his job and was jobless for 4 months. He eventually convinced Eileen that the family should go from Atlanta to New Mexico, which is around 400 miles distant, and begin a new life there. The Clarks eventually made their home in Albuquerque, where Eileen provided John with financial assistance while he launched his own window blinds company. Now, Eileen claimed that although John had always displayed a violent and verbally abusive side to his personality, at this point, she claimed that it became worse due to the strain of his new life. She said that all of a sudden, she was subjected to a barrage of grave threats and harassment. At last, in February 1995, Eileen made the decision that action was warranted. Eileen left the house with the kids after informing John in a letter that she had taken them to an amusement park. Rebecca, Hayden, and Chandler were just 2, 5, and 7 years old at the time. Initially, the 4 took sanctuary with a friend of Eileen's in California, but later on, Eileen insisted that she was afraid for her children's safety and that John had located her in the Golden State. The mother, who seemed terrified, then chose to remove herself off the map. "He kept telling me, 'I know where you are,'" Eileen said in an interview with the UK publication The Sunday Times in 2011. She said, "I was frightened and I didn't want to go back." That was it. Eileen and the kids were no longer in John's life. Despite Eileen's insistence that she told the authorities where they were living, she acknowledges that when she wasn't around, John wasn't notified. Furthermore, in June 1995, Eileen was accused of interfering with a person's custody in a New Mexico court. John was completely clueless about the whereabouts of his children for the following 13 years. He kept suing Eileen in American courts because he had nowhere else to turn. The Clark kids were consequently reported missing and placed on the FBI website. Nevertheless, with no leads to follow, John started to entertain the very real idea that he would not see Rebecca, Hayden, or Chandler ever again. Then, in 2008, as John was working, he got a call that would alter everything. It appeared like Eileen and the kids had finally been located by the authorities. But by then, they weren't residing in California or any place else in the United States. Actually, they had moved around 5,000 miles and made a fresh start in the southern English academic city of Oxford. It seems that in 1999, Eileen relocated to the south coast of England's Isle of Wight with the children. Additionally, she married Ron Woolsey, a Canadian, a new spouse. After residing in Scotland and Wales for a while, the desired mother's marriage to John had ended in 1997, and she appeared to have been granted permission to stay in the UK by her new spouse, who was of Scottish descent. The family finally made Oxford their home after that. Eileen started homeschooling Chandler, Hayden, and Rebecca when she got there. Opponents of Eileen, however, think that this was an attempt to hide the kids' identities by not listing their names on official records. The mother insists, however, that she has always schooled her children at home. Actually, according to Eileen, she didn't even know that John was looking for his kids until 2004. At this point, a friend told the mother who was sought that the FBI was circulating her name. Eileen became concerned and called a lawyer, who subsequently told her that the allegations of custodial interference against her had been dismissed. But that was by no means the last part of the tale. Hayden, the middle son, told a physician in 2007 that he had seen his name on an FBI list of missing children online. So the doctor didn't lose any time in telling the British authorities, and presumably it was this information that helped the Americans find the family the next year. Even still, it would be years before John saw any of his children in person, even though he now knew where they were living. Chandler and Hayden sent a letter to the FBI in 2009. The young men, who were now 21 and 19 years old, said they were content with their lives under their mother's care and denied going AWOL. But their appeals went unanswered, and they ended up on the FBI website as endangered adults. Furthermore, Eileen was now facing an additional accusation of international parental kidnapping. The entire weight of the United States government came down on Eileen this time. A new deal that went into effect in 2007 gave the United States more authority to extradite suspected criminals who were living in the United Kingdom. In the political context that followed the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon in 2001, the pact was positioned as a more expedient and successful means of combating terrorism. However, after being detained in 2010, Eileen was faced with extradition under the same treaty. U.S. prosecutors were requesting that the mother of three return to New Mexico so she could face charges, in part because of the fight on terror. This occurred 13 years after the dissolution of her marriage to John and 2 years after her whereabouts were ascertained. It just didn't seem fair to some people that Eileen had 2 adult children. Meanwhile, Eileen started providing her version of events surrounding John's claimed verbal and physical abuse as part of her resistance to the extradition process. She said it was so awful that she had to leave the country out of concern for her life and her children's safety. She told the UK Parliament that John had threatened to have her killed and had been physically abusive to her for a long time. John and Eileen fought their war on both sides of the Atlantic for the next 4 years. While human rights organizations and the British press were able to back Eileen, John appeared on Dr. Phil, a talk program in the United States, to argue his point. In the meanwhile, John had a brief reunion with Hayden and Chandler when they paid him a visit in New Mexico in 2010. However, it seems that the two then went back to live with their mother and severed their relationship with their father once more. Eventually, Eileen was successfully extradited back to the United States in July 2014. She entered a guilty plea to the accusation against her in an Albuquerque court on one account, that of her daughter, Rebecca. Of the mother's children, she was the only one remaining underage. Eileen was given a year of unsupervised probation in return, and she returned to the UK with Chandler, Hayden, and Rebecca. Even after leaving the family home 22 years ago, John is still hoping to see his kids again in the future. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.